I guess I never told this story. So I've got some notes so I don't leave out any of the details. But a year ago yesterday, today's August 15th, 2025. A year ago yesterday, August 14th, 2024, um, I had a motorcycle that I had for sale. It was a 2004 BMW, and it had some issues when I first got it, but I got it running, got it all functional. It wasn't ready to take on the road or anything, but I got it back to working order. Had it up for sale, and had a guy come to look at it that night. So over lunch, it was a Wednesday. I took lunch about 11:30, and I thought I'm going to do a quick test ride and just a couple miles down the road and back, and and just to make sure it's working correctly. So I grabbed my helmet and jacket for some reason. I don't know why. A short trip like this, I wouldn't have grabbed really either one of them, but I did, um, and took off down the road. And I made it a couple miles down the road and was turned around coming back, and I started to lose power. Which, if you've ever dealt with motorcycles, you lose power, you just kind of push through it and whatever. So I was giving it more gas, and I kept dying out. So um, I couldn't figure out what was going on, and it just consistently kept dying out and getting slower and slower and slower. The motor seemed to be running fine, but I kept losing speed. And then I woke up on the ground. The front brake on those models had a known issue of failing shut, and eventually it locked the front wheel up and it catapulted me into the ground, bounced me off the pavement. So when it did that, I rolled around, and I mean it was bad. And I knew it was bad. It broke my helmet. It had I not been wearing my jacket, it would have broken my arm, or it definitely would have put all the impact on my elbow with no padding. So I just, by a fluke deal, I didn't break my arm and have my helmet on. So um, I fought my way to my feet after a few minutes. I tried to lay in the gravel to kind of catch my breath and get feel better. So I got up, and with everything I had, I mean, I was in bad shape. I was in pain, having a hard time breathing, got the wind knocked out of me and everything. So my bike was laying in the middle of the road, so I went over there, picked it up, and pushed it off to the side against the front brake. I used every bit of adrenaline I had, but I got it out of the road. So I I I was going to have to walk to a neighbor's because there was nobody. I mean, nobody I could call. This was like immediate, and I saw that there was a neighbor who had motorcycles when I rode by. Um, Now we had just moved into this house probably a month before that too, so there was another piece to the puzzle. I didn't know anybody. We had friends in the city, but in town, but anyway. So I walked down there, and I grabbed my helmet and my jacket for the walk because I was having a hard time talking. So I walked up with my jacket and helmet in my hands to my now friend's house. I take him Christmas cookies every year now, but I got into his driveway and I dropped my helmet, dropped to my knee, and I just said I need help. And so him and his guys jumped into action. They were outside, happened to be outside that day. They jumped into action, and they made sure that they got me and my bike back to the house. You know, it was a process. We got there, and he said, "Now, based off the way you're acting, I want you to go to I want you to go to the hospital." I said, "Well, I'll be fine. I've pushed through all kinds of different pain in the past." And he goes, "Nope." He said, "I'm not leaving until you agree to go to the hospital and you make arrangements to go to the hospital." I said, "All right." I said, "What? Why is that?" Well, they had a friend who had similar injuries, didn't realize he had a punctured lung, and he ended up passing away from it. So they had a good reason to say that, and so I made a couple calls and um, got got one of our friends here in town. Um, they got me to the ER, but in the process, I called Kathy. Now keep in mind this is about 2 months before our wedding, so I called her and I said, "Hey, don't freak out. I got to go to the hospital," and told her kind of what happened. And so she was in San Antonio, so she made a beeline for the hospital. I get there, and this this is kind of where things went off the rails a little bit. Um, I went into the ER, and they discovered that I did in fact have a hole in my lung. I had punctured my lung, and they needed to do a pigtail chest tube, which, if you're familiar, you'll understand why this next part was miserable. If you aren't familiar, look it up. It's terrible. Um, on the first attempt, they put it through my side underneath my right arm. The first attempt, they put the first piece in, and then they ran the guide wire through. When they when they ran the guide wire in, the tip of the wire bent, so they couldn't get it into my chest cavity. Um, what that means is they had to pull it all out and start over. So uh, chest tube sucks in general, but this made it suck worse. So the second one, they did. I think they went through the same hole. I wasn't paying attention, but they may or may not have. I'm not a medical person, so I don't know. But it sure as hell felt like the same hole. It hurt. So they put that second one in and got it all the way in. They did an MRI and said they had it. They got it. But since this was an automotive related accident, um, they they had to send me to a level one trauma center, which was Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, or BAMC. So they set up the ambulance ride, and that was a 90-minute brutal. I That was miserable too, because it was rough, and it took about 90 minutes to get in town, get into San Antonio from Kerrville. So now we get to BAMC, the emergency room, and I'm in more pain than I was when I left Kerrville. And that's bad. That's not a good thing. Another interesting piece to this whole equation is that BAMC is a military training hospital. So they took me out of the ambulance and they rolled me into this room where like there are at least 20 people in there. They were mostly students. They were all watching, taking notes, doing, they went through and did my vitals. They did more imaging. And they got to know me on a very, very personal level. But once I got all my vitals done, they got the imaging done, they moved me to a smaller room. Now, the smaller room was cool. It was a little bit more private. Kathy had made it to the hospital, so she'd been in Kerrville. She had to go home to get some stuff and then meet in San Antonio. So she heard the first two chest tubes going in. Yeah, she was right outside the room when that was being done, and the noises, you can't control it. It's excruciating. So anyway, she had to deal with that. She made it to the hospital, to BAMC, and they had her in a small private waiting room, and she said she heard a code, like they called a code over the system. So she's freaking out. She doesn't have any updates. She doesn't know what's going on. Well, the I this was at some point in the process, so I don't know when it lines up with what was going on in my room. But anyway, she wasn't there in my room with me, so she had no idea. The A doctor comes into my smaller room and tells me that, unfortunately, the current chest tube I had, wait for it, went all the way into my lung. So basically, they made it worse, and more air was getting into my chest, which is why I wasn't feeling so great by the time I got there. Um, Now, at this point, there's a little bit more of a, I guess, a concern. So people are moving a little quicker. I'm not improving. They had to remove the second chest tube and prep me for, you guessed it, a third chest tube. So this one, the first two went in under my arm. This one was going to go in under my clavicle. I think that's right. But this is so different place, different placement. But I do feel better overall because they kind of they had all their facts together. It seemed like they were more together than where I was. But this is where it gets even more interesting. So, like I said, BAMC is a training hospital. So I'm in my small room. I look around and I've got a person to my left. I've got two people to my immediate right, just right up right here, and then I've got about 4 to 6 people at the end of the bed past it, and they're just monitoring, watching. So and I'm kind of assessing the situation, and I realize that the woman to my left is the she's constantly being looked at for approval by the people on my right. So I start to piece everything together, and I asked the woman to my left, who was the doctor. I said, "Who's driving this needle?" And her response was, "I'll never forget it." She goes, "Don't worry, he has plenty of oversight." So I realized that the guy doing the the chest tube has never done one. This is his first one. Um, and I want to take a quick snapshot here. I've had two chest tubes fail, in pain, still have air in my chest cavity. I have a room full of people with what appears to be one, maybe two that are in charge, but not actually doing the work. I have a guy down here trying to figure out how to open up the uh, what is it, the thing that they place to make a clean area. Uh, Shoot, what's it called? Anyway, it's the sterile drape. He's trying to unfold the sterile drape, and I watch. He's struggling with it. That's the guy furthest down, and then the other guy looks like he's reading directions on a piece of IKEA furniture on how to place a chest tube. So he's nervous. He's visibly nervous, and I'm sitting there kind of thinking, here I am. I've kind of had a rough day, and now I have this kid who's I've had more chest tubes in me in the last 2 hours than this kid's ever placed in his life. So um, it's it was a little nerve wracking. So um, now the kid finally did figure out the sterile drape, and that was in place. The kid reading the directions on the needle. He finished reading all the directions, so he's hovering over me, and I can tell this kid's nervous. I mean, he's like he's not shaky, but he's not 100% confident. You can tell it a mile away. So I had a choice right then to make. I could be upset that I was a test dummy for two guys in their first time, or I could just accept it and and do my best to help as best I could with them and make them feel better. At least this guy with the needle. And so I didn't have a choice in the matter. And so I looked at the kid and I looked him dead in the eye, and from where I was sitting under, I said, "Hey, man, you got this. You're going to do awesome. We'll get through this. No problem." So I could tell he was relieved right then. I mean, I'm sure it was nerve wracking for him, but he did. He was awesome. He kind of calmed down there. I could see it. So we were good. And he starts to drive the first needle, which I think is called the catheter. He drives that in, and you don't have control over the noises you make when something like that gets. So like there's a guttural groan that I let out, and he stopped because he thought he hurt me, and I stopped and I said, "No, keep going." I said, "Don't pay attention to me. Just keep doing what you're doing." So he got that one in all the way, and and then you have to run a guide wire through it, and so he put the guide wire in, and I think this is I may not be 100% accurate on everything here, but there was a point. This is the funniest part of the whole story, is that the doctor told him to move the guide wire to keep it from. I think it's to keep it from sticking. Like if something were to start to heal, it would stick to that guide wire or something along those lines. He needed to move it, and this kid starts moving it like he's stirring a pot of soup, and just around and around and around. She stopped him and she said, "No, no, no, no." She goes, "In and out, not around." So he then went back to doing this, and that was a new kind of pain that I hadn't felt all day. But anyway, then they got everything set up, and they were able to release all the pressure, and it felt like, I mean, it was a crazy release, and I was able to take a full breath. Everything was good. Everything was stable at that point. Um, and they ended up moving me into they found a room for me in the emergency room, and we had a private room. I spent the next 4 days there. They were monitoring. We were slowly fixing things and taking things out and whatever. It was pretty rough, but Saturday, the 17th, exactly 2 days before, or 2 months before our wedding, Kathy Kathy took me home from the hospital and had to recover, but it was a close one, and I mean, just some of the random chaos from that day is still funny to me. The story, I don't think anybody else finds it as funny as I do, um, but it was very, I'm very very fortunate, very very lucky, but but that is a story that has been in the making for a year. I just haven't gotten a chance to make a video about it. I did end up selling the bike. I traded it on a couple of things I wanted, um, and it's hopefully off to a better home. I will probably never buy another BMW motorcycle for as long as I live. Um, but I have since gotten completely rid of all my motorcycles. I had three at the time. I sold all of them. Um, but yeah, so that's my story. So been very lucky, very blessed. But hope you enjoyed it.